Hello. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person to say thank you, but I had the opportunity to travel to Ireland to see my friends get married in this castle. And I've learned in life, you have to grab opportunities, but more on that later. First, I'd like the chance to thank the faculty of the Communications Department for this very humbling award. It means so much to me that they've chosen to honor the person I've become versus the student I was. Also, I'd like to thank Dr. David Tucker, who's still a member of the faculty. He was my professor and my academic advisor when I was a student here at UT. And without his very persistent pushing, I might not have graduated. So I've tried to take the chance over the years to say thank you to him. I graduated from the university 20 years ago. Both of my parents graduated from UT back when it was called TU, so it meant a lot for my family for me to be here. When I was thinking about what I wish someone had told me when I was your age, what I could say that might make a difference, it's this. Take risks, be fearless, and grab at opportunity with both hands. Sometimes the small decisions you make a ripple across the pond of your life that are really surprising. I'll give you some examples, and all of them led me on my path one step closer to being here with you today, well, at least on this video. Back in 1987, long before any of you were born, I was a junior at Whitmer High School. I was a mediocre student. I loved band and I loved English, neither of which did I think was going to lead to a career. Then one day, my English teacher asked me if I would consider writing for the high school newspaper, the Panther's Paws. I thought, why not? And this is the first example of what I'll tell you a lot about today, which is take risks, be fearless, and grab opportunity with both hands. It turned out that I loved journalism, and I was good at it. I was a naturally curious person. I really liked the attention of having my byline in the paper every week, and it seemed like something that I could grasp onto. I knew then that I would become a journalist. Then, this sweater, which I dug up from the basement this morning, changed my life. I bought it on a trip to Toronto, and it represented my newfound passion of newspaper journalism. And frankly, it was the coolest sweater I owned, so I wore it to my freshman orientation at the University of Toledo. Back then, you had to register for classes in person because online didn't exist. Online meant literally in line because you had to wait in line to find out which classes you were going to be able to register for. So wearing my trusty newspaper sweater, I registered for my classes, then wandered out into the student union where various campus organizations had booths set up. They were looking to get freshman participation in their organizations on campus. I was walking towards the booth for the Collegian wearing my newspaper sweater when a girl at the booth for WXUT called out to me and asked me if I was going to be a communications major. Well, of course I was. I was going to be the next Pulitzer Prize winning print journalist. She called me over and talked to me a little bit about WXUT and explained that doing news for radio was going to be far more fun than doing news for print. Just like that, I changed my mind, and I joined a group of ragtag radio people who became my closest friends and helped me to launch my career. By the end of my freshman year, I was the news director of WXUT, doing daily news broadcasts and weekly half-hour interview shows. I even got to interview Larry King, who was really the king of all interviewers. One day, the production manager at WTOL, Channel 11, called Terry Teagarden, who was then the faculty advisor for WXUT, and asked if he could send over a few students to interview for a part-time job in the production department. 7 hours a week at minimum wage, which was $3.35 an hour at the time. Terry suggested me, and I went to the interview. Take risks, be fearless, and grab at opportunity with both hands. My part-time job turned into a full-time job, and I was an assistant director at WTOL by the time I was 20. I was working full-time and going to school full-time. I went to work at 3:15 in the afternoon and worked until 11:45 at night, and I took all my classes in the morning. I was exhausted. Also during this time at WTOL, I met Dave Werning, who would later become my husband. We've now been married 19 years. Sometimes I wonder, if I hadn't worn this sweater and I hadn't stopped at the WXUT booth, would I ever have met Dave? Would I ever have had the career in broadcasting that was the springboard for my career in public relations? TV is really the perfect background for a career in public relations, which became my vocation in 1993. After working at the Toledo Ballet and the March of Dimes, I landed my dream job at the Toledo Museum of Art. I was too young and I was too inexperienced, But I was a risk taker. I was fearless, and I grabbed at that opportunity with both hands. And I convinced them, and eventually myself, that I could do that job. 3 years later, while working at the museum, I got a call from someone who asked if I'd ever considered working at a PR firm. By now, you know me well enough to know that I said yes, and I grabbed at that opportunity. I worked at 2 PR agencies here in Toledo, but during that time, my love of museums never waned. I learned my craft better than I ever dreamed I could, and I tried to convince both companies that we could build a practice on museums. Neither thought that would be profitable. In 2006, Dave and I were laying on the beach in Florida the day we took this picture, and he said, "You should open up your own agency." I squawked and I squirmed and said no, but he kept pushing. He asked, "If you were to open up a firm, what would you call it?" I looked out at the Gulf of Mexico and said, Blue Water Communications. 10 days later, I filed the paperwork and opened my own public relations and marketing firm. Take risks, be fearless, and grab at opportunity with both hands. Blue Water Communications is now 5 years old. We're a team of 6, and 80% of our business comes from museums. Our clients include the Toledo Museum of Art, the University of Michigan Museum of Art, the Princeton University Art Museum, and Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art. Recently, we added the Columbus Museum of Art, and we'll begin that project soon. Crystal Bridges was truly the greatest example of the lesson I'm trying to convey. The museum, located in Bentonville, Arkansas, was the first museum of American art opened in this country in 50 years. It was created with a $1.4 billion, with a B, dollar gift from the Walton Family Foundation and the lead benefactor, Alice Walton. You may be familiar with the business her dad created. It's called Walmart. We went up against some of the largest firms in the country to win that piece of work. They wound up hiring Blue Water, not the fancy agency in Washington, D.C., or the elite agency in New York that specializes in museums, but Blue Water. So that's my story. There's only 2 more things I'd like to share with you. The first is learn to write. Write every day, and I mean actual sentences with a subject and a verb, not just 140 character long tweets. There's an actual drought of writers in the workplace. If you learn to write, you'll also write your own ticket. Finally, I'd like to pass along a piece of advice that was shared with me. Give where you learn and where you earn. At some point, maybe not when you're a student and maybe not immediately upon graduation, but at some point, someone will ask you to do something for the University of Toledo. At that time, remember, give where you learn. That ask came to me in the form of a group at UT called Women and Philanthropy. I joined 5 years ago, and it has opened so many doors for me and re-engaged me with the university. I also had the opportunity to teach a class here, news writing, and considered it one of the high points of my career. My students were extraordinary, and I considered it a compliment when one of them told me I was too hung up on grammar. So remember, take risks, be fearless, and grab at opportunity with both hands. The course that you will travel is being navigated right now, maybe even today. Again, my sincere thanks to the faculty of the Communications Department. I'm very, very honored by this award. Enjoy the rest of your day here on campus.